If you've watched enough of my videos or my content, you've probably heard me drop the term virtue, intellectual virtue, or the virtue ethic. What do I mean when I say these things? Well, I'm glad you asked. There are three broad movements in philosophy. The first was going back to Plato and that era is what is reality? This is what we call ontology. The second is how do we live in light of the real? So this is Aristotle and his range up through about Descartes or Occam, depending on the particular thing you think about in the history of philosophy. This is what we would call praxis, or as Aristotle would say, virtue. After Descartes or Occam, depending again on your perspective of things, philosophy took a major turn and started thinking mostly about epistemology, which is how do we know the truth, or how do we know what we know? So most of recorded history, the recorded history we're familiar with, since about Occam or Descartes, has really been focused on epistemology. Praxis or virtue has always been considered to be downstream of epistemology, and ontology is just kind of considered floating out there someplace until we can solve all the problems with epistemology. Well, let's back up off of the view of epistemology and reconsider praxis just for a moment. Most of the time, we think about praxis like this. You do what you think. If you change your thinking, you'll change your doing. Well, Aristotle and many philosophers after Aristotle will say it's not really that simple. Consider the impact of technology on our lives. We create a technology to solve a problem. The technology solves or changes the way we do things, which changes the way we think, which throws up new problems we need to solve or new ways of thinking about problems, which then drives us to build technologies to solve those new problems. The way we build a house. We started out with hand saws and maybe some mallets and things like that. And then someone invented the hammer and the nail, which changed the way we build houses. Then we decided to use the nail gun and the screw gun. This completely and totally changed not only the process of building the house, but the materials we use in the process. So you not just do what you think, you also think what you do. It's a spiral. They are interconnected or interrelated things. So what you do shapes what you think. This is the basic observation of the Aristotelian virtue ethic. Aristotle primarily applied this to ethics. You can become a better person or a more ethical person, not necessarily better, depends on your definition of better, but a more ethical person by doing the things that are ethical. The more ethical you are, the more ethical you act, the more you become an ethical person, the more you think ethically. Now, we can apply this observation to the way that you think as well. And this is what's called intellectual virtue, applying the virtue ethic or the concept of virtue to the way you think. You think what you do. If you read complex books, you can become a complex thinker. If you read many different viewpoints, you can become a diversified thinker. If you read broadly, you can become a broad thinker. But this also applies to forms of media. If you gain most of your knowledge via video, you become a visual thinker. If you gain most of your knowledge by short snippets of facts that you've looked up using a search engine or AI or whatever it might be, you become constrained to thinking in terms of factoids. You lose the importance and the beauty of narrative and the power of narrative in your thinking. If you are dishonest, you will learn to think dishonestly. If you are self-centered, you will then learn to think selfishly. So if you read books or you consume content just for what you can get out of them, you will become a selfish reader, focused on what you can get, instead of focusing on what the person who's building the material is trying to say. So virtue theory argues that you must build up from that which you can do to that which you want to do. It's like lifting weights. Everybody goes to the gym and they think, I'm going to bench press 250 pounds. Actually, you're not. You have to start with what you can actually bench press safely and with good form and move yourself up. Same thing in the shooting sports and many other areas of life. People walk in, they think, I do this, and boom, I'm going to be brilliant and beat everybody else. No, you're not. You have to build up. Learning to play a piano or some other musical instrument, you start with simple things and then you work your way up. It's the same thing with your thinking skills. Your thinking skills are just like your body, just like your muscles, just like your ability to play a musical instrument. You have to start with simpler things and you have to move your way up. So if you want to learn to think well, start by solving simpler problems first, and then learn to solve ever harder problems. Dave Myers once said to me, solving a problem is like getting under a weight and lifting it. It's really heavy and you don't know if you can do it, but you work and you work and you work and finally you get it up. Well, that is exactly what it is. You have to build your thinking skills over time. This is the way you develop intellectual virtue in the one aspect. There's also the ethical aspect of intellectual virtue, of reading to gain what someone else says, of preferring or honoring the other, the person that you're listening to. These are other parts of it, but just thinking about your thinking skills and your technical thinking skills, the aspect of intellectual virtue that applies here is that you need to build up over time. So this is one of the dangers of AI. People talk to me about AI all the time. And one of the dangers I see in AI is that we think we can relegate all the easy stuff to AI and we can keep all the hard stuff for ourselves. We can actually say, oh, let the AI solve the easy problems and I'll be the creative one or whatever it happens to be. It doesn't work that way. If you offload the simple stuff, you won't learn how to do the hard stuff. You don't just develop intellectual virtue randomly. It's an intentional, slow, and often frustrating process. So when you get out there and you start thinking about how you're going to build your thinking skills, think about intellectual virtue.